Alright, we're going to build a transmission for the T-34-85. What you're going to need is you're going to need all 4 of your transmission plates. You're going to need your 4 gears, your drive gear going to your motor, your final drive gear, and your 2 reduction gears. You'll also need your gear spacers. There are 3 of those in the files. You'll need a 2205 motor. The lower the kV, the better. Obviously, an Allen key to match your M3 hardware. Optionally, you can have an M3 tap. Makes putting this together a little bit easier. There are 7 bearings we're going to put in here. You're going to need silicone grease at the end. That's really important. Super glue is going to hold these spacers into place, and then your M3 hardware kit. The first step we're going to do is we're going to glue the spacers with a little bit of super glue into the appropriate gears. The one that's most important to get right is the final drive gear, the smaller one. It has the larger spacer, has a larger space in the middle between where it inserts and between where it rides in the bearing. Put your drive gear on your motor. It's just a 5mm shaft with an 8mm nut. Bonus tool, 8mm wrench. You're going to start with this largest plate, and you're going to work your way across through these other plates, and we're going to build this from the bottom up in layers. Starting first with your motor. So for this, you're going to want to make sure you use 4mm M3 screws. These happen to be bevel head, but button head would be better. Really, the only thing you're concerned about is not running the threads into the windings of the stator. The step's complete. Now we're going to take 2 bearings and pop them into these holes. If you ever extrude it a little bit, you might be able to get this into the freezer and pop them in, but they are designed so that they should just press fit. For this step, make sure you don't have any excess glue seeping around the edges, or that this is completely dry before you put it together. You're going to start with this gear first, the one with the space in the middle and the coarse teeth up top. You're going to put that facing down, and then this larger reduction gear slots into this spot, interfacing with this large gear and this smaller gear. Just like that. Alright, the next piece you want to install is this plate. It's just going to slide from from the outside over that gear. I'm using a 12mm M3 screw. I did chase the threads with an M3 tap. That's just going to make it a little bit easier. It's not necessary. The screws will actually hold better if you don't chase the threads. You'll be able to apply more torque. However, it is quite a bit harder to assemble. You want to make sure you don't have any gaps between these plates as you're assembling, especially since all portions of the plate are essentially threaded. That looks good. Install this bottom left corner one first. You grab your next plate. This one gets 2 bearings installed into it. If you're short on bearings and you're short 1 or 2, you can omit this bearing. All it really does is go over this nut and kind of serve as a limiter for play. I haven't observed this thing flexing too much or at all really, so you don't necessarily need that, but I like it there. This bearing will slip right over there. And then you'll sandwich this layer, and this layer with an M3 screw. I'm going to use 2 M16, I believe. The size isn't as important as it is to make sure you've got just enough threads in the final layer, and that 12mm just doesn't look long enough. So we'll use the M3 16mm. Once you have that tight, you get this last piece. Pop in 2 more bearings. Put this with the long spacer side down after you put a bearing in. Alright, there we go. Now that should mesh into that last gear. Let's see if I can figure this out first try. There we go. Okay, yeah, so these two will just slide over top of these shafts. And then you'll secure these screws, and then I missed one here as well. Looks like for this one, I'm going to use a 10 mil on this corner. It's a pretty thin area right there. Like I said, the length isn't as important as the effectiveness. It's just for reference. For this last plate, you're going to want to use the 45-degree bevel screws. This rests right up alongside the wall, the outer wall of the hull. So, some of these. Just got this new pack. It's probably got a little clear piece of tape on it. That's the worst, right? As soon as I take this tape off, the whole lid's going to break. Oh, there's another one. let's see which one of these is most appropriate. Maybe a 12 millimeter. Might be a hair long. Let's try an 8. Eight's a bit short, 12's a bit long. Would you believe it? There's no 10s in here. I'm going to go with 8s because there's 4 of them. I think I'm going to be okay. But if you got a 10 millimeter bevel head screw, that's what I would use. Alright, so now the construction is basically done. Just give that a little test run. Cool. So while we have it out, some of the critical places, anywhere these big flat surfaces get up next to these walls, you're going to want to make sure you get some silicone lubricant in there and just apply it right there and then work it in. You get some here. All these gears you're going to put some. Now once, I mean this isn't going to be perfectly coated right now, but once you get this transmission going, this stuff's going to work its way in. Just check on it after you get all your electronics installed. As long as you put just a little bit of this silicone lubricant on these gears, I've never had one break in all the testing I've done. They get grass. I mean, back when I was testing this without a top on the hull, you'd get grass in it, little chunks of dirt, and just mush up, go through the gears, come out the other side. One instance where I forgot to put lubricant on the gears, the gearbox did bind up. Actually started to melt the gear right there. I caught it, popped it loose, and then after I lubricated it, it was fine, it ran fine. So you're going to do the exact same thing. It's a mirrored image. I designed one, mirrored the whole design over. So it's the exact same assembly process. And then we're going to drop it down into the tank real quick so you can see what that looks like. And this is going to be pretty obvious when you put it in here. It's going to want to sit in there and mesh with this final gear just one way, whether you're working on the left or the right. Now once you have it in there and it's meshed with this final gear, you're going to flip it over, and these holes in the bottom of the hull, you're going to want to secure at least 4 of those. There's 6. You can put screws in all of them, but you want to do at least 4. Alright, I put these 4 in. That's all you're going to need. Alright, so now, just give it a good test run.
Everything's moving the way it should.